visiting the Project tab, we are going to explore some of the options available through the Create menu and examine how they interact with the scene. Specifically, we will focus on the material object and the prefab object and how they function as assets in the project folder. Opening the Create menu in the project folder reveals quite a few options for the creation of different assets for the project. This is where you could create assets, including new scripts, which can be applied in any number of scenes in your project. When an asset is created this way, it will appear in the project folder, but not directly in the current scene. Let's take a look at the material asset. A material is a framework for the implementation of a shader to tell the Unity engine how to render textures and objects in your scene. When you create a new object in the project folder, the Unity engine will automatically put you into the name the object mode, object rename basically. And from here you can add a name to that object. Examining the material through the Inspector tab, we find that the default shader for the new material is the standard shader. There are quite a few different options and things to consider when selecting a shader. And if you cannot find what you're looking for, you could create your own custom shader. For more information about shaders, check out the Unity manual. For the purpose of brevity, we'll examine two different shaders here and discuss some of the settings and how to apply them. To change the shader of a material, use the rollout at the top of the inspector with the material selected. Choose your shader from the provided list. If you create a custom shader using the instructions in the manual, it will appear in this list. The default standard shader is a physically based shader. Reading from the manual, we find that means it simulates interactions between materials and light in a way that mimics reality. This is an all-purpose shader designed to be used for just about any application. If you have a texture to apply to an object, you would apply the texture through the albedo channel in this shader. Check out the Unity manual for more information on the specific settings in this shader. The other shader we're going to look at is the Legacy Diffuse shader, which is one of the simplest shaders available. This shader is really nothing more than a color channel for your object. As a low-profile shader, the Legacy Diffuse shader is commonly used for testing or when resource efficiency is a priority. Like the standard shader, the diffuse shader can apply a texture map in the base field. To apply a material, you can do it on a selection of objects through the Mesh Renderer component in the Inspector tab. There you will find a materials array, and in that array you can change which materials are applied. Or you can apply a material by dragging the material from the project folder onto the object in either the hierarchy or the scene view. Turning our attention to a different asset type, let's examine the prefab. A prefab is a container by which game objects can be stored and instantiated. The prefab maintains all the component settings contained in a game object and any of its child objects. To build a prefab, select the prefab in the Project tab's Create menu. This will create an empty prefab asset. To populate the prefab, take a single game object, with or without children, and drag it onto the empty prefab in your project folder. When the link is established, the name of the game object will turn blue in the Hierarchy tab to indicate it is an instance of a prefab. Any changes made to the prefab will be delivered to all of its instances. However, a change to an instance will require the Apply button to push the changes to the prefab and other instances. A prefab is the preferred method of creating instances of game objects through scripting in a scene.